Heyo, and welcome to my very first YouTube tutorial on this channel. My name is Charles and you're welcome to Scripting with Charles. So for today's tutorial, we're going to be working on this very simple multi-step form. It's a very simple multi-step form, and if you click on next, it goes to email, phone number, then next. Another thing I want you to notice is that this also changes 1 to 1/3, 2/3, 3/3, and it moves from red to green. So this is what we're going to be working on. Something very simple, straight to the point. So let's jump into it. So first of all, I'm going to create like the bare bones to kind of visualize where each element is going to be. Then from there we would move upwards, then we move upwards and go on like that. So I'm going to create a main tag, then inside the main tag I'm going to have a form. Then I'm going to style these two, and before we move to any other thing, so let's give this an ID of overall container, and let's give this form an ID of form container. Okay, now let's style this. I'm going to create let's call this styles.css, and then link href.styles and style sheet. So for me, if I want to start, I just say body. If I want to know if it's working, if it's properly linked, and let's say aqua, save, and then okay, yeah, so it's linked. So the first thing I would like to do is to just create the bare bones, just strip out some things that I wouldn't need. So sorry, padding 0, then box sizing, border box, save, then so for the body itself, I would say let's say display flex, and then a height 100 view width. Then for the overall container, which is this, so let me just copy and paste that. Overall container, then we say background color. Let's see. For now, let's give the background color to be aqua, so we can see what we're doing. Then the width would be 80 view W, height would be 70 VH, and margin would be auto. So this margin auto would bring it to the center, and the reason why it's going to come to the center is because of this display flex here. So yeah, let's see what that looks like so far. Oh, sorry, container. all right, yeah, so that's that. So let's move to the form container. So the form container is this. For the form container, we'll say background color, let's say white. Then width, we'll give it 43%. Then the height, we'll say 100%. Okay, so let's give this background let's give the body itself something so we can see it. Let's go blue violet. Okay, so this is where the form container is. but we want it to be on this side, obviously. So what we'll do is we'll go back to our overall container, and then we'll say display flex, justify content, end, and then align items center. Let's see what that would be. So now it comes to this side, which is how we want it. So now if we're visualizing this website, so this project or this app, whatever, this is what it will be. So we know where they are arranged. I like working like this before I start doing any other thing, so that I know where each item. It's just good to put them in boxes like this. You may do this later in your project, or you may do it early on like this. It doesn't really matter. But personally, for me, I like visualizing it so that I know what I'm doing. So let's head back to the HTML. Let's head back to the HTML, and then we'll continue from there. So for the HTML, we're going to give it a header. Let's give it a header in the form. A header in the form. Let me say H2 registration. Then we say a H3. Then in the H3, we're going to have one span. So this span, inside the span, we'll have a 1. Then right here, we'll have over 3. This, of course, this is going to be changing a lot. This is going to be dynamic. That's why we're putting it in a span. Then beneath the header, we're going to put a div. So then we're going to put another div. So this div, this second div or this inner div is going to house the label, which is first name, and then beneath it we're going to have an input and type text. You don't have to put type text because by default it's a type text. So we'll duplicate this, and then we'll call this last name. So this top div is going to, so if we look at the project itself, so there's a div, we don't see it, but it's there. So that's what's housing that. Yeah. Okay, so after that, the next thing we are going to put is the button. So after this div, we'll put the button. So button is next. Then we give it an ID because it's just one button. I'll call this next button. So if we look at what it looks like so far, this is what it looks like. And so it's time for us to now put the remaining styling. So the styling for here, just it's time for us to style every other thing. So for what we want to style, so let's start with styling the header first. But before we start, so we'll just give everything an ID, and then we'll move into how we're going to style them next. Okay, so for the header, we are going to give it an ID called form header. Then for the H3, we'll give it an ID, we'll call it numbers box. Then for the span, because this is going to be dynamic, we're going to give it changing number. All right, so for this div, we'll give it an ID, we'll call it input casing, and then from there we'll style. Okay, so we don't, yeah, is there another thing we need to style? Okay, this shouldn't be an ID, this should be a class, because You'll see the reason later, since we're not just going to have one of this. So since we're not going to have one of this, so let's hop into styling it. So we are just going to style the overall container. So to style the overall container, I think the first thing, let's give it a background. So if you look at so if you see it, you can see there's a background picture. I'm going to leave a link. So if you check the GitHub in the description, you'll see the picture there. Add a link to who took the picture, because it's good to give credit. So this is the picture we're going to be using, and so we're just going to give it this a background image. I already brought the picture here, so a background image is going to be URL and /pencil png. So let's see what that looks like. So as you can see, it's there, but it's not how we want it to look like. And then so we say background repeat, no repeat, background size, cover. So let's see what that looks like so far. Yeah, so we want to give it a padding, so this padding, and then we want to curve the edges. So with that, we'll just say padding, let's see, padding 45 pixels, 25 pixels, and then border radius 15 pixels. Save, and let's see what it looks like now. So yeah, so now that we have this, we can get rid of this blue violet background, so that's white. So let's just comment that out. Yeah, looks great. So for the font container, we'll just say, give it a padding 55 pixels. So this is 55 pixels up, down. This goes up, down. Then this goes 40 pixels to the left and to the right. So that's what this, in case you don't know what I'm doing there. Then, so yeah, let's just see what that is. So you can see up, down, left, right. Yeah. So next, we would say display flex, then flex direction, colon, and then we'll also give it a border radius 15 pixels. So this is what it looks like so far. Now it's time for us to style this header. So here, so we called it a form header. So that's an ID, form header, display flex, and then justify content space between. So you could see it's stacked on each other, but with display flex, and now it goes to the edge from here, gives it a space between. Then from there, we want to style we want to style this number box. So we want to give that a red. So we'll say the color should be red. Then from there, we would style this input casing. So remember, it's a class. So instead of a pound sign or hash sign, we use a dot. So input casing, we'll say flex 1. So flex 1 would take the remaining space accrued. So like the remaining space of what is inside this flex box. So it's taking the remaining space. So we can't see what is there. So let's just, let's just see what it would look like. Let's just give it a background color. So we'll say blue violet. and so that you would understand what I'm saying. So you can see it's taking up the remaining space. Yeah. So I guess you get that. So the next thing we want to do is, so we say display flex, then we say flex direction, we say colon. Then after that we say justify content, space between. Then we also want to give it a margin of 40 pixels up and down and 0 pixels left, right. Then a padding of 25 pixels up and down, and this. So this is what it looks like. So don't worry, we'll get to the remaining ones later. So the next thing we want to do is we want to work on the label, which is this. So I'll just copy this out. Then label, and I say display block, and then font size 18 pixels. Then I want to style the input next. So instead of that, I'm going to say input, and then I say height 35 pixel, width 100%. So this is what it looks like now. So it's time for us to style the button. So let's just style the next button. The next button is height 40 pixels, border, we'll say we don't want any border, so border none. Then we say background color bisque. Then we'll say a font size 17 pixel, and then we say cursor should be pointer. So with that, if we look at it, yeah, looks great so far. So now we can jump into JavaScript. But first of all, let's take a look at pseudocode. Let's do some pseudocode. We'll talk about some principles. Then we would start JavaScript. So we'll start before we start writing our JavaScript code. Like I said before, it's important that before you start writing your first lines of code, when you're giving them a project to work on, it's good to pseudocode. For people who are already in programming for a while, most people write the pseudocode in their head, but sometimes we do write out the steps we want to achieve in a particular project, one after the other. So for this particular, what we have seen so far and what we're working on, these are the steps we're going to take one after the other. So then this is how you approach your coding, this is how you approach your programming, and generally in web development. So in order to help out with your pseudocode, I have some principles that programmers generally apply. I think it's just in programmers, but I'll just call it the child's principle. It's something everybody uses, but for the essence of this tutorial and for every other tutorial in future, we'll call it the child's principle. So we have a couple of principles I'm going to mention, then there'll be emphasis on the principles that would apply to this particular project. So the first one is when it comes to one or the other, like if it's something, let's say for example, the program says it changes from white to yellow and from yellow back to white. That is, if for example, if they say it's a light switch, the light switch is either off or on. So it's either light or darkness. So if it's one or the other, you use true or false. Then another principle I think about is if you think of a list of something, then put that thing inside an array. Then if you want to affect something in that entire list, then just make use of a loop. And then if you want to affect something from step to step, then you would use an index to track that step-to-step thing. That, yeah, so those are some child's principles that we would use. Let's just call them child's principles, you know. And so for this particular project, we'll be making use of the number 2, and number 2, number 3, and number 4. There are more principles, but 2, 3, 4 would be very, very effective in what we are doing. And you would see the reason why as time would come on. Now back to our programming. Let's start writing JavaScript. I'm sure a lot of you have been waiting for this period. So we're going to call this main.js. And I'll just put a console.log. We'll say yam. Yep. See. And so I go back here, and here we just say scripts source equal to .main.js. So if I go back and inspect console, refresh, yeah, so it's properly linked. And so I can close this. So back to our main.js. So the first thing we want to do is we want to bring in this changing number, then we want to bring in the next button, and then we'll bring in the numbers box. Those are the things we're bringing for now, and so that we could work on them. So changing number, so wait, let me just copy this. So changing number is equal to document get element by ID, and then we'll say changing number. All right, then let me copy the next button. So we call this ID next button, and then we'll say const next button is equal to document get element by ID next button. Then we say const numbers box is equal to document get element by ID numbers. Let me just copy that numbers box where you come here, numbers box. So we are going to add an event listener to this next button so that when we click, because the idea is that when we click on the next button is when something would happen. So say next button dot add event listener, click, then we'll put an anonymous function. But if you're starting out, you could, if you're not used to writing an anonymous function, you could just as well just do an anonymous function like, and if you are not used to writing an anonymous arrow function, you could just write an anonymous function like this. It will still work. So, but for me, I'm going to write an anonymous arrow function, and so the first thing we want to do is that we want to track. So remember what we're doing is changing this from 1 to 2 to 3. So we're going to create a variable that would house that number that will move from 1 to 2 to 3. This would also represent our index of what we are tracking. So we'll say let present number equals to 1. So when we click, what we want is that we want this present number to move from 1 to 2. So we say present number is equal to present number plus 1. You could also say present number plus plus, but just for the sake of simplicity, we would say present number equals to present number plus 1. So we're saying this present number plus 1, assigning it back to this one. That's all we're just doing. So let's just see what it will look like. So if we console.log present number. Let us see console.log present number and see what happens. So I refresh and go back. So now if we check the console, so if you see next, you can, oh sorry. Okay, so now something just happened. When I clicked on next, it did a refresh. That's because this button is inside a form. And so whenever a button is inside a form, it assumes it's a submit button. So to prevent that, you could either do e dot prevent default here, or you just go back here. And the simplest one is just go back here and just say type and say button. So we want this to be a button, so that because it's in a form, it will assume that it's a submit button, but putting it in here and saying this is a button, now it knows it's a button. So back to what we're doing, refresh. So now if we click on, you can see it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's increasing, but it's not reflecting here. So what we do is, to make it reflect there, we would say changing number dot inner text is equal to the present number. So now the inner text of this changing number, which we have put here, would now be the number, this number. So refresh, so you can see 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah, and like that. So now we can see that it's going beyond 3. We don't want it to go beyond 3. So what we'll do is, right above the rest, we'll say if present number is greater than or equal to 3, return. So this return keyword would just stop it from returning. Oh, sorry, we'll just stop it from going down. Yeah, so once it sees this return, it doesn't execute the rest of the code. Yeah. So now if we go back, we refresh, so you can see 2, see it doesn't go beyond 3. So if you look back at our pseudocode says that the next thing we want to do is that when it gets to 3, we want this to change to green. That's the next thing we want to do. So how do we do that? We say if present number is equal to 3, then we'll say this number box, which is this, the color of whatever inner text is inside should be green. So we'll just say number box dot style dot color is equal to green. So remember, color would always cascade down. So if this is green, anything inside would also take the color green. That's what I mean by cascade down. And so let's check that out. If we refresh, you can see next. So now green, it's now green. So yeah, that's what we're going to do. And so what we want to do next is, so if we look at our pseudocode, we said the next thing we want to do is we want the previous button to show. And so it's time for us to create, let's create we haven't created, what's it called? We haven't created the previous button before. So it's time for us to create the previous button, style it, and then make it work. So back to our HTML, let's create a div. We'll call this div, so inside this div, we'll now put in both the previous and the next button. So I'll just duplicate this. And I'll say call this previous, and then this would be pre button, and then let's just give this div an ID. We'll call it button container, and then we'll say class. No, we'll give it a class, but not now. I would explain what that class would do, but for now let's just style it, and we'll get to the class also in the styling so you understand what's happening. So in our CSS, so what we'll just do is, let's copy this. Okay, so let's even see what it looks like. Okay, so you can see it looks like this. Then what we want to do is we're going to style this also. Pound previous. So both of them, so we give both of them a width of 45. So you could see both of them are, yeah, but they are kind of, let me close this. So they are kind of standing beside each other. We don't want that to happen. So what we'll simply do is the parent, so this button container, will style this button container. So for this button container, so for this button container, we'll say display flex. Oh, not flex. Then justify content space between, so it touches the end. Yep, that's what we're looking for. So what we are trying to achieve is a situation where initially it's only the next button that is supposed to show. So let's imagine the next button is, let's just imagine it's only the next button that is showing. So this is how it's going to look like. But you can see it's losing the 100% width that it has because it's width 45%. So what we want to do is that in the parent container, which is this button container right here, we're going to give this a class that would predict the styling of this next button and the previous button. So let's just give it we'll call this expand button. So this is some CSS magic you're about to see. So what we'll just do is we'll say if there is an expand button, so that's what so it's like if there's a expand, if this is the expand button and there is a so the first thing we want to do is that we want to affect the previous button. We'll say that we want the previous button to disappear whenever this button container, if there's a class called expand button in the parent, we'll just say prev button. We want it to disappear, so display none. So now if we refresh, the previous button is not there. So if we call this, let's say button name, you see it will come back. So but once previous button is there, it disappears. So we also want a situation that when previous button is there, we also want this next button to have a 100% width. That is, when this previous button has disappeared, then yeah, something like that. So let's okay. So this is next. Sorry, next. So we would say width 100%. So now that is 100%. So this class is what we're going to be manipulating so that the previous button disappears and then the next button becomes 100% width. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. So the next thing we want to do is let's bring in all this. Let's just bring it in. right? So we're going to say const prev button is equal to document dot get element by id, sorry, prev, what am I doing? Oh my god, this is funny. Prev button, right? Then let me just copy the container. This. Then const button container is equal to document dot get element by id button container. So now when we click on the next button, what we want to happen is if it's not 3, then we want to remove this expand button so that the previous button shows, because the expand button is there, so the previous button is hidden at the moment. But once we click on the next button, we want that previous button to show. So we'll say else. We'll now say button container dot class list dot remove expand button. So we save that. So let's see how that works. So next, see, the class list has been added to it. And so if you console.log button container class list, you see, let's say in the beginning, you see the class list, then you see, if you console log it again, you see that the expand button has been removed in the class list. So you could try that out. Okay, so maybe we should just take a look at that. So let's just console log this. In the beginning, we'll just say console.log class list. So we'll just do that here again so that you could see what happens. So refresh. Console. So now if we look at it, you can see there's a class, this is the class list. And you can see in the class list, there is something called expand button in the list. But now when it's consoled again, there isn't anything in the list. So that's what I mean by class list. Okay, so that you understand. And we remove this, save it. So that works. That works. So we click on it again. So next. So now if we click on the previous button, nothing happens. So what we want to do is that when we click on the previous button, we want to reduce this from 3 to 2 to 1. So all we have to do is say previous button dot add event listener, click, put an anonymous function, whether it is arrow or normal function, anyone that you would like. Then excuse me, then we'll say present number is equal to present number. So it's just like this one here. So let me just copy this and paste it. So instead of an addition, we'll just do a minus. Simple. So we'll just refresh and see how that works. So next, previous, oh, sorry, but that's, something's not working. Okay, oh, okay. Sorry, I was supposed to put this to, my bad, so that it shows. Refresh, so yeah, the previous button, so you could see. So now you could see something is happening here. It's going beyond 1 and going to the negative. So we'll just apply the same principle here, but in a different way. So we'll just say if the present number is less than or equal to 1, we will return. So that's that. So we refresh and let's see next, previous. So you can see it's not going beyond that, so it's returning. And okay, so that's for that. The next thing we want to do is when it gets to 1, we want the color. Okay, so let's take a look at something. So we'll click on next and next. This is green. But if we click on previous, it's still green. So what we want to do is that when we go back, it changes to red. So let's try that out. So that will just be simple. We'll just say numbers box dot style dot color equal to red. So fresh, next. So now it's green. If we click on previous, it becomes red. Go back, green. Back, red. Yeah. Yay! So now when we click on next, so you can see the previous button is still kind of showing. The previous button is still kind of showing when we get to 1. We don't want that to happen. We want a situation when it hits 1, let it go back to to next, let it be full. So what we'll just do, say if previous number is equal to 1, so we'll just say button container dot class list dot add. So we want to add this expand button back to it. So let me just copy that. Dot add expand button. So refresh. So next. So if we click on previous, so now that it's 1, it's back to being full. Yeah. So now you can see that if we click on next, previous. So you see next, yay. So the next thing we want to do is when we get to 3, we want this next to have a submit. We want to change it to submit. That's what we want to change it to. That's what, so we'll make it submit. And that would be when this is 3. When this is 3, make this submit. So I'm sure by now you would have noticed that a lot of things we have been coding so far has to do with the number, whether it is 3 or it is 1 or it is 2 or something. Yeah. So I hope you're seeing that pattern. Okay. So so when it is 3, I also want it to be. I want the text inside this button to be submit. So next button dot inner text is equal to submit. So if we go back, if we refresh, next. So now, oh sorry, that's a small letter S. So let's make it better. So now you can see it says submit. But now when I go back and I say previous, so you can see it's still saying submit. And that's not what we want. We want a situation that when we go back, when we click on the previous button, it moves from submit and it moves to next. So what we're going to do is we will just simply say, just write under what makes it, this is red. So they're kind of together. So we'll just say the next button dot inner text equals to next. So refresh, so next, submit. If we click on previous, it becomes next, submit. Yay! So yeah, previous, next, previous. Yay! Previous, next. So that really looks good. That really looks good. That really looks good. So I'm sure now we are getting to the part that everybody has been looking forward to, which is this thing swapping. So moving. So what we want to do is let's go back to our HTML and make more copies of the inputs. Then we would style them and then work with it in JavaScript. So back to our HTML, we are just going to duplicate these things. So this input casing, we're just going to duplicate them. Then we would hide them one after the other. So now let's duplicate. So now duplicate it again. So if you're using a Mac, it is Option Shift down. So that's a save. If you refresh, now this is what it looks like, and that's not what we want. We want to hide this remaining one and just want this one to remain. So, but first, let's just change this. So we want this to be email, phone number, and then we want this to be password. I want this to be confirm password. Okay, so that's that. So to hide this, I'm going to be adding another class inside. So I'm going to call this class hidden form. So hidden form, save. So when we go back to our CSS, so we're just going to, for the hidden, so we'll go to, sorry. So this input casing, let's just copy this. Then we'll put hidden form. Let me copy from here so that I don't have to type it out and don't make a spelling mistake. So hidden form, I will say display none. All right. So now everything with that class would be hidden. Yay! So it's this class, this hidden form class, we're going to be manipulating to swap out these things, which we're going to do in JavaScript. I hope you guys are excited for that. This is the point where I make reference back to the Charles principles I made earlier. And so, because I know that this part is a part that would confuse a lot of people. Now, remember, when I said when it has to do with a list, make sure you put it in an array. And now you could see that this is kind of like in a list. It's like you want to do something to the three of them, which makes it kind of like a list. Luckily for us, in JavaScript, when we put something in a class and everything has a class, they come in an array, which is kind of like a list in JavaScript. So luckily for us, that has been worked out from scratch. And then what we want to do is we want to make all of them hidden at first. So remember, if you go back to the Charles principle, I said if you want to affect the entire list, you do what? You loop. So we're going to be applying a looping principle to this to hide all of them at first. Then after we've hidden all of them, then we would show the one that we want at the moment. Back in our JavaScript land, in our main.js, we're going to create a function called, we'll just call this function, let's create a new function. We'll call this function show present input. So like I said, remember, if you want to affect anything in a list, you would have to loop through it. So what's that list? How do we create that list? We are going to create that list by bringing in all the input boxes. So remember, it's a class. So we'll just say const input, sorry, all input boxes. It's equal to document.query selector all. And then we'll just say input casing. So if you console log this all input boxes, you're going to see it's a node list, which is like an array. So the all input boxes is an array if you console log it. But what we want to do is down here, we are going to loop through it and then hide everything. So we'll just say all input boxes dot for each. If you're not comfortable using a for each, you could just use your normal for loop. It doesn't really matter. And close this for each, and then we'll say box index. So we'll just say box dot class list dot add. Sorry. Then we'll say hidden form. So that is we're adding this class called hidden form. So what will happen is that when you click on next, sorry, no. Oh, sorry, I haven't. My bad. So, okay, let's put this in the next. So let's put this down here. So now when you click on next, it will call that function. So next, you can see everything grows. Every single one of them grows. Every single one of them grows. And that's what I was saying. If you want to affect everything in a list, loop through it, which is what we're doing here. And then, but what we want is, we want one of them, the next in line to show. So all we have to do, that's very, very simple. So all input boxes, present number. So you know the present number is what we are tracking. So remember, I said so in the Charles principle, I said if you want to affect something in an array step by step, use an index to track that step by step, which is what we're trying to do here. So we're trying to affect one thing inside that array. So we're going to use present number, but we're going to say present number -1. So why are we saying -1? Remember, in an array starts from 0 to whatever the length of the array is. But for us, we are starting with 1. So if you want to start with 0, what do? You say present number -1. That brings you to 0. So class list, then remove. Then we'll say, in this particular one we are tracking, we'll say hidden. Just essentially, we're just removing this hidden form. Save. So now we refresh. So we click on next. You see, in a split second, because JavaScript is a fast language. So you see, in a split second, everything has gone, and now we have the next one in line, and like that. So as you can see now, obviously nothing is working when we click on previous. It's not moving to the next one. So that's simple. All you have to do is show present index, put it below this. Refresh, next, previous, next, previous. And with that, that's the end of the project. I know. I know in the beginning it looked so, oh, how could this be? Especially if you're new to programming, but as you can see, if you break down what you want to work on into tiny chunks, you'll be able to make any project you think of. And that brings us to the end of what this project is about. I hope you've been able to learn something in this particular project. If you want to have access to the code, a link will be in the description to my GitHub repository. And if you also want me to make this in React, please do mention it in the comment section. If you also want it to be done in Vue, please also mention it in the comment section. Let's work with React, let's work with Vue. And if you also want, maybe I would expand this and give it a form validation. So we could just, do something with this, and give it a form validation. I look forward to making this in React and Vue if you would like. And then on to the next tutorial. Till we see you again next time, I remain Charles. Bye. I know there is no outro. There wasn't any intro video and there's no outro. Just take it like that. Bye.